when we started this conversation, what did we start with? We started with the conversation of, I don't know if I can hire somebody right now, or I don't know why I'm not making money. All of those conversations will start to have real teeth in them because you're now going to see this is what's happening. This is what I got to do. I've got to get to this revenue level. I was having a conversation with a client recently. He's, hey, what revenue do I have to get for me to take a distribution that I want? Need to be this number. And so there was a gap there, and we had to figure out, you got to close that gap with new business mostly, or pricing adjustments, or your staffing. You've got too much staff, efficiencies, a lot of those things are coming into play.
This is the Bender CFO Podcast, where we empower business owners to gain financial clarity and maximize growth.
Hey guys, it's Shane Bender with Bender CFO Services. I just want to talk to you today about what's important that I think is important for all businesses. I mean, ask yourself these questions. Have you ever wanted to know where your business is headed from a profitability standpoint? Do you want to make decisions around hiring? Could be also overstaffed. It could be anything like that. Expenses. You feel like something's not right. Your profitability is not making a lot of sense. Maybe you're not earning the distribution or the profit that you're expecting. A lot of those things. It could be hitting cash flow. Something is wrong with your cash flow and you don't really quite understand what that is. Ultimately, what that's leading you to is kind of this discomfort, this stress, maybe keeping you up at night. You just know something's wrong, but you don't know what it is. You keep asking questions, you can't get to the answer. And so what I start in working with any business, and we're going to specifically talk about marketing agencies. Now, bear in mind, I just had to pick an industry. I have a lot of experience in this particular industry, over 20 years, but it can, and I use very similar templates in other industries. And if this is a service-oriented business, you can see a lot of correlations. But let me just tell you right now, what we're going to talk today is using a marketing agency example. But I want to spend some time explaining to you what I do in my initial engagement. We have something called a growth and profit engagement. It's great for companies that do not really understand what CFO Services is. And by the way, another thing about CFO Services is it changes all the time. I mean, it's different all the time. It's different for different types of CFO Services. You know, there's more accounting focus. There's more, we're going to go out there and find investor focus. There's so many different elements to that. Today, though, one of the things that I feel like any good CFO should do is understand your current forecast model, your current business model, and how that relates to the finances. And that's going to start with getting access to the current financials, but it's building it out and seeing where you're headed. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to break this up into different videos, different sessions, because I want to make sure I don't explain way too much. But first of all, I want to show you right now. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to just give you the exact model, a template of what we do in working with businesses. So first of all, I'm going to show you a template. You're going to see a lot of tabs on here. I get it. And sometimes I'm talking with business owners and they don't want to see all this. This is way too much information. But ultimately, what you want to know is how much money are you going to make this year? And so it's all part of the equation. Now, we're seeing an example here of a company that is on track to hit 4.3, almost $4.4 million. Bear in mind, your company could be smaller, your company could be larger. I work with companies from 1 to 20 million or greater, and this model works. It works in any scenario. And these are metrics that work in any scenario. Revenue being your revenue, your fees, net of any pass-through costs, media costs, whatever you might be doing. It's your fees, your revenue. Gross margin, how much money are you making based after you service your client? And this is a huge metric. I love to see 50 to 60%. And then operating profit, another huge important EBITDA. So where a lot of business valuations, it's measured and significantly off EBITDA. And that's after all your overhead costs, your selling, your administration costs are taken out of that. And you get to this number. And I love to see this. I'm giving you a good example. I like to see these percentages. 20% is great. But I see companies that are losing money or they're break even or they're less than 10%. And that's not ideal. And there's usually something wrong in the formula. A lot of times their gross margin's too low, which means they're spending too much money servicing their clients. Why is that? A number of reasons. And so we're going to spend some time today talking about revenue. Now, how do you get revenue? First of all, you've got your existing revenue contracts. That's hugely important that you understand what that is. Get access to your QuickBooks, to your accounting system, to whatever you're using right now to understand what your revenue is per month, and then break that out by client. We do that a lot of ways. We can pull reports from the accounting system in a way to do that. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is fill out this sheet. We go to existing revenue tab. As you can see on this existing revenue tab, we've got a list of clients. We've got different services. Please bear in mind, your services could be anything. I'm just specifically listing some different services that you might experience in a marketing agency. There's also flat type fees. Okay, we're going to charge you $10,000 a month. There's other types of fee percentage of media. That's going to require you to get their budgets. You have to know their budgets. And please don't say, oh, I don't know these numbers. We don't have budgets. We're going to leave everything zero. Well, that doesn't make sense because zero is not reasonable. These are existing clients. I mean, unless, maybe you have a minimum. Well, if you have a minimum, then you can put the minimum in there. If you don't have minimums, I suggest you probably have a minimum because what's happening is you have people that you're paying to service those clients. Maybe they're servicing lots of clients, but if all of your clients don't give you any indication on what your fees are each month, then how do you know if you're going to have enough money to pay them? So this is what this is doing. You are putting together a plan to understand your revenue by client, by service, and you might have to get to contracts. You may have to look at historical information. The more historical information you have, especially if you go back to last year, it's helpful because think about it, companies and customers, they spend money differently at different times. And if you're a percent of media type situation where, I see this all the time. It's like, well, we're going to, it's going to be $5,000 a month unless the percent of media is over that. And then it's going to go to that number. You got to know those calculations because you may be like, we're going to spend a lot in November, December because that particular customer tends to do a lot of marketing in the holiday season. So you're going to need to know those budgets. If you're working with the client, you should have budgets. If you don't have budgets, then you're just going to look at historical budgets and assume similar results and apply the agency fee percent or however you do that. There's so many different ways that the clients earn money. And here's another thing. When you do this exercise, one of the big things that is helpful for is you to understand, do you have clients that may potentially have upsell opportunities? They are not utilizing a service that you could potentially sell to them. That's additional revenue. And that goes into the identified upsell category. It's hugely important. And that's all low-hanging fruit there. You're already working with the client. You have regular conversations with them. You're working and strategizing with them on how to help improve their marketing. And so you might be like, oh, well, we got this other service here that you're not utilizing, and we can provide that. Here's a quote. Here's the benefits. Why don't we get started? It's generally a little easier than it would be in a scenario where you have a brand new client. You just start that relationship. So this is a hugely important exercise. You have the information. We're putting that all into an organized format. We're updating actuals, and then we're forecasting the rest of the year. And then guess what? We're going to be able to then look at actuals to forecast. Why is that important? Here's something that once you've done this exercise, this is a great report. It's like, okay, this is what happened in the month of April. This is what we forecasted. Here's the difference. Why is there a difference? Could be a lot of reasons. Oh, well, they didn't spend as much as we thought, or we forgot to bill them. That's an accounting and operational problem if you forgot to bill them, but it could be a trend. You've got to adjust your forecast. It could be a number of things. And so that understanding the actuals to the forecast and that difference. And then how does that affect for the year? Like this forecast is changing. And I recommend regularly, once a month at least, changing. Why did it change? Are you getting more revenue, or are you getting more media spend? Or the client spending more budgets with you that's going up? Or did you do additional service that's going up? Or the other way around, and having that understanding and that comparison is hugely important. And guess what? It will improve what you put over on this tab. Therefore, your forecast continues to iterate and improve. And when your forecast becomes more reliable, especially a month or two out, you then start to feel more confidence with these decisions that you're trying to make. When we started this conversation, what did we start with? We started with the conversation of, I don't know if I can hire somebody right now, or I don't know why I'm not making money. But, all of those conversations will start to have real teeth in them because you're now going to see this is what's happening. This is what I got to do. I've got to get to this revenue level. I was having a conversation with a client recently. He's like, hey, what revenue do I have to get for me to take a distribution that I want? Need to be this number. And so there was a gap there, and we had to figure out, you got to close that gap with new business mostly, or pricing adjustments, or your staffing. you've got too much staff, efficiencies, a lot of those things are coming into play. But at least you have that number and you know the gap and you know what you got to work with. And that provides a lot of peace of mind because at least you have something you can do to work towards that goal. So revenue forecasting is hugely important. So I suggest first and foremost that you do this exercise because this exercise feeds over, and believe me, it affects cash flow. It affects everything else you're thinking about financially. It feeds over to the P&L. And once you know that number and you know, hey, I'm on track for 4 million this year. I'm on track for 337,000 a month or 500,000 a month or $1 million a month. It doesn't matter how big you're, 100,000 a month. Doesn't matter what size you are. You know, this is your existing revenue run rate. And then you move into other categories like upsell opportunities, identified upsell opportunities, identified new business clients. We're going to talk about that in our next video. Other clients that are in the pipeline and what's that potential revenue and how is that calculated? And then unidentified. That is related to, hey, you're trying to hit a certain number and it's a plug number. And then attrition. You're going to lose clients, making sure that you have something in there and that you can replace the clients that you're losing or you may lose. So all of those are parts of revenue, hugely important. I hope that all made sense to you and why we start with this. This is part of our growth and profit engagement. We start and we spend probably 2 hours on almost revenue right at the beginning. We don't really go into all this other stuff because the other stuff, if you don't get the revenue figured out and how you're making your money and you're earning it, and of course there's gaps there, but you don't get that figured out, then it's like the expenses and the cash flow and all the other components are a little bit, I mean, they're important, but they become a little confusing because you're like, wait a second, do I have a revenue problem? Do I have an expense problem? Do I have a cash flow problem? What is the problem? And so I've got to start with understanding your revenue, your potential revenue. And obviously that starts with what your existing contracts, agreements, and run rates are. So that is pretty much the first step in any type of engagement and what we do working with clients. Thanks so much for listening to the Bender CFO podcast. Help us out by subscribing on YouTube so you don't miss another episode, or listen to us on Spotify and rate us 5 stars so more people can get this content to help their businesses grow and be successful.